What is up, everybody? This is the Wild Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Heskett, and this is episode 99. All right, today's guest is Shanon Safi. Safi? I think it's Safi. Shanon, I apologize if I butchered your last name there. Shanon is a registered dietitian, internationally accredited life and success coach, and entrepreneur, and founder and CEO of Fuel the Fire, a holistic wellness and life coaching business that combines Western and Eastern practices to help clients heal their relationship with their body, feel empowered in their purpose. And Shanon loves to cook, spend time in nature, sculpt with clay, dances like no one's watching. She teaches Buti, yoga. It's a type of yoga. And she has her own podcast. She loves to record along with reading. So lots of hobbies, kind of like myself. We actually met through my old boss. I think they were in a mentorship together. Anyways, he introduced me to her because she likes traditional foods that use organs, and I also like to eat kind of nose to tail, so we kind of hit it off from there, and then have been kind of in touch since then. And she's going to tell her story, but she was a registered dietitian. We nerded out about nutrition stuff and coaching clients and stuff, and I've watched her transform her business while she's seen myself go from coach to business owner to now merging with LWA coaching, etc. So we've stayed in touch and finally got her on the podcast. I'm super excited for you guys to listen to this episode because I don't think we talk about nutrition once directly. Like indirectly we do, but it's a lot of mindset and other things going on with what's going on in between your ears when it comes to creating the changes you want to create in your life and reaching your goals. What's up, Shanon?
Hello.
How's it going today?
Today is good. I am really grateful that it's really starting to feel like fall now because I'm really ready for that season change.
Yeah.
Happy with the time change, even though I know a lot of people don't love that. I'm here for it.
I'm in the camp of I don't love it. I don't like it being dark at like 5:30. I'm like, I'd rather it be lighter later, but everyone's a little different.
Yeah. I always just think it's like cozy and it helps with my sleep, and it does something for me. So I can totally understand the other side, but wherever you fall, here we are.
For me, it's okay from like now to like New Year's. And then after New Year's, it's just like, there's no like holiday lights out or anything else. Like it's just like cold and dark. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'd rather it be lighter later. But I also have some pretty bad seasonal affective disorders. So it being lighter later is also helpful for that. So I'm like, I'd rather that, especially since I'm a night owl. People are like, oh, just wake up earlier. I'm like, that's not happening with me.
Yeah. You got to flow with the rhythm of your body.
Yeah. So I have like one of those, actually it's literally on my face right now. The one of the bright like lights for seasonal affective disorder because it just helps so much. If I don't use it, it's a bad time come like January.
I support that. I think that's really cool. There's a lot of awesome tools out there that really help, especially with the season change. And if you're in an area that, like you're going to feel it more strongly living in Pennsylvania than you would in other parts where they don't have that same daylight change.
Absolutely. When I went out to Arizona, was it a year or 2 years ago in like the late spring, like or late winter, early spring, that was like, oh, this is nice. I really like this because it's late, it was warm, you're getting sunlight, and then I come back, I'm like, this sucks. Welcome back to Pennsylvania. This sucks.
Maybe you need to move to Arizona. I don't know.
Both sides of the family would hate that. we would my wife's side would hate it, my parents would hate it. Like, no, like everyone's on the East Coast, stay here. You can get like a vacation home there, but don't actually move. But I see why people do move. Like
Yeah,
the
it makes
winters,
sense.
the winters are nice. Is when we went, it was like 85, 90 degrees, whereas like Pennsylvania, I looked, it was like 32. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I see why. Like we're out in shorts and t-shirts, just chilling out all night to like 11 at night, just relaxing versus back home. My wife's like, it's snowing.
Mm. Yeah, if you're not a winter person, it's definitely a lot. Like there's a lot of appeal to being somewhere else. But yeah, if you like winter and you like all the other seasons, it's easier to flow. But agreed, when there's family involved, it definitely makes those decisions a little
It's
bit more
challenging.
challenging.
I mean, I love fall. Really, like the 3 months I don't like are January, February, March. Like if we could just skip those, like if I could move someplace else for those, that like first quarter, just terrible. The rest of the year, I'm fine with like how Pennsylvania is. It's just January, February, March. I'm like, just like go New Year's and then skip to April. Like, that's what I would like.
You'll just have to take your whole family and convince them all to transport somewhere else.
Good luck. That's not
Yeah.
happening. There's no way. Florida would be the easiest. I'm like, I don't know if I want to move to Florida.
That's also fair.
Yeah. Okay. So that's enough about that. So I brought you on because one, you're a registered dietitian, but you've also gotten into life coaching, and your style of coaching is very similar to the way we coach our clients when it comes to mindset and habit change and lifestyle change, which ultimately is the most important thing for lasting change when someone's trying to improve their health, lose weight, etc. And I just think it's really cool seeing someone else kind of doing very similar things and getting amazing results with clients. But you didn't start that way. You started just kind of like nutrition coaching and as coaching fitness. So kind of like walk through that evolution you went with your business. I know that's a loaded question, but you have all the time in the world. So if it's a long story, go for it.
Awesome. Yes. So the business has gone through quite a transition that really aligned with my personal evolution. And my hopes in taking the business along with me is that people can witness that journey. And I've been really open and transparent about all of the changes because, number one, anyone that can connect to that story can start to feel like they're not alone. And yeah, number two, it's like, things are changing a lot more rapidly and it's scary to take that jump and make those changes regardless of what type of change it is. So it's it while it is difficult to be in the spotlight with all of it, it's also really important to be willing to do that and to put yourself out there, and it's something that you kind of sign up for in the world of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
um, So, in the beginning, my business started as just nutrition counseling. So, I just had a small office. It was just me, and there were just 1 hour sessions. So, people would come in and we'd talk about predominantly nutrition because that's what my background was in. As time went on, through those sessions, just hearing what people had to say, what they were struggling with, and what I really wanted to be able to provide to make sure that they were actually having the transformation that they were coming in for, I started to add different elements to the business. So, the first thing I did was I moved into a new office space and there is an empty room. So, this is like an office building. There's an empty room that connected to my waiting room. So I asked the landlord if I could take over that space and I introduced personal training. So it was just either one on one or at most like four people would be in there. So it was like one on one or small group. So that I really wanted to create a space because what I was seeing come up for a lot of women is this discomfort with like going to the gym because they didn't feel like they knew what they were doing. So it was just stopping them from going at all. And so I thought to myself, like, why not create a small, intimate space where they don't have to worry about that, where they can really learn how to move, how to do things properly so that they can build that confidence and show up in the way that they want to, whether it's still in our space or whether it's in a big location, a bigger gym, or go on to play a sport or whatever it is that they're trying to build and really go to the gym for. So after that, the next stage of that evolution, I started posting a lot about what I was cooking because my personal belief around nutrition, there's so much fear around what we should and shouldn't eat, and the media demonizes a lot of things, and we get so caught up and this is good for our body, this is bad for our body, and that creates so much like polarity in what we're trying to accomplish, and it becomes so confusing and you don't know what to do, and you're like at the point where you're basically just afraid to eat because somehow somewhere everything you've read tells you that everything that you're consuming is horrible for you. So it was like, okay, I really want to show people that you can eat regular food and still be healthy. And when I mean regular food, I mean it's like things like pizza that you don't typically think like, oh, you can't eat pizza if you're trying to eat healthy. A lot of things that we just typically think are like quote unquote bad for us.
Mhm.
So when I started blogging, and it was like when Instagram was still newer, so I would always be posting different ideas, and I would like count the macros and make sure that they were balanced and make sure, there was enough protein, carbs, fats. So everything was like that. So you could be fully nourished with what you were putting into your body. So from there, what ended up happening, I had this idea of like, well, what if I taught people how to cook this stuff? Because a lot of people, they would see the recipes, but take no action on it because
Mhm.
it was like, oh, there's so many ingredients, or it's stuff that I don't buy, or what if my family doesn't eat it? And so then I found a building that I could renovate. So I turned the downstairs into a gym. The upstairs had a couple of offices where we could continue to do nutrition counseling. And then we basically like blew out some of the walls and just made one big teaching kitchen. So we turned it into meal prep classes. So essentially, people would come in, we'd had class Mondays and Sundays, and we would just create meals for the week that people could come home. And so the guarantee was that like all these meals are going to be perfectly balanced, perfectly portioned, and you're going to be able to make them in an hour or less. So this eliminated a lot of the fears that people had around different things. Like we would make pasta dishes, we would make like we've made pizza, and I mentioned that one, like a lot of those foods that people would typically fear. And we wanted to show people a way to make them balanced and like eliminate that fear, and to know that, yeah, I can eat this and I feel safe eating it and I don't feel guilt eating it.
Mhm.
So it was helping people eliminate a lot of those negative ties and emotions that they had around what it meant to actually eat healthy, and release a lot of that like societal conditioning or media conditioning around what proper nutrition looks like. So that was really amazing. And what happened with the next layer of the evolution, this is where my personal journey really got into things. I think personally, I was having like a really big spiritual awakening, is I guess is what you would call it. So I identify as someone that was like always really ambitious, and I always saw my vision continuing to expand and evolve, and I wanted my business to keep growing. And I was just really in this rat race of like achieving and doing all the things and like having the best title, having the greatest job, making the most money. And I was really attached to those things and how it had people perceiving me. So I was so caught up in the perception of like being this super successful girl that did all the things and like has the fit body and all of that. So when I started to like, there was just a point where it was like everything was perfect, right? Like I felt like my business was doing amazing things, and it's like I bought a house, I bought a car, and I'm like, all right, this is the dream, right? Like I'm living it. Like this is everything I've ever wanted. And something in me just like there was always this voice of like, how long are you gonna be able to keep this up for? And I would think that about like the way I was eating, the way that I was working, and like the way I was working out, all of those things were just creating a toll on me because I also like worked out really hard. I competed in CrossFit for a while, and that is really hard on the body. And so like I was just feeling completely depleted. I didn't make any time to really properly nurture myself because I didn't even know what that actually meant. I thought I was doing it by like eating healthy and moving my body, but the mental, spiritual, emotional piece wasn't properly being taken care of.
Mhm.
And so while I was working so hard to support my clients in that journey, I wasn't giving it to myself. And so it really made me take a step back. And I really, like, I knew if I was going through this, a lot more people were also going through this. It's just hard to be the first one to say, like, to say something, to be like, wait, like this can't be it. And I remember having little conversations, with different friends, and kind of being like, oh, so you think this is just life? We just keep waking up and like doing all these things and like that's it? And people would be like, well, yeah. And like no one really was questioning it the way I was. I was like, well, this can't be it. Like, I don't know, this isn't really fulfilling. And people are like, yeah, but like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So it's like you just keep doing it, and you just get used to it. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I feel like I could feel better. Like, so, I don't know what I need to change, but I feel like I could feel a lot happier than I feel right now. And so, I basically I was just having a tough time showing up in my life at that point to the same degree. So I took a step back and was like, you know what? I mean, looking back, I can't tell you if like hindsight's 2020. So I ended up selling the business, which, maybe I should have just taken a very long sabbatical, but I did what I thought I needed to do in that time because there was also the part of me that didn't want to make everything about, like, I didn't want to center things around like weight loss anymore. I think that was probably the biggest piece is I just remember talking with clients and being at that point where I just didn't want people to think that focusing on every little calorie and everything that goes into your body was truly a solution for their confidence and their happiness and feeling good in their body. I just started to realize like it was so much deeper. But when you're known for weight loss and when you're known for nutrition and fitness, I was just attracting people that didn't fully get it. Like I would say it was like a 50-50 divide. Like
Yeah.
half of the people were seeing it and were really open to the coaching aspect, the life coaching aspect that was working in naturally. But then the other half, it was like they didn't want to hear that piece because they were like, I just want to look at this way.
Mhm.
And they just weren't at the stage of readiness to look at things differently. And that's totally okay. Everyone's going to be in different spaces of their journey. No one's to say this direction is right and this direction is wrong. It was just, I'm on this path and this is what I truly believe. And so I want to fully step into that. So the reason I decided to sell the physical location was so that I had time to like take care of me. I was so engrossed in the business and I just needed a break because I was just so depleted, completely burnt out. Like nothing, even things that I liked were not exciting me. Like I just felt really confused. It was this like space of the void that I feel like I just needed to let myself be in before I could decide where I wanted to move forward. Because I just realized like I didn't really truly know what I wanted. Like everything that I had was a construct of what I thought would make me happy. And then once I had it all, it was like, well, like, is this actually what I wanted? Or is this
Mhm.
just what I believed was what I'm supposed to want? So it was like a really deep year and a half of like self exploration and coming to understand myself and even like healing my relationship with my body as I slowed down with like the fitness and stopped counting my calories and pulled away from it. Like my body changed. It's like, especially because yeah, like I was just doing so much that I couldn't keep up with. And it was all like high intensity, everything all the time.
I
And so,
remember, I forget when you posted, but it was like your before, after, after. I was like, wow, you went through a massive transformation.
yeah, it was, I would say it was like my identity before was like fit chick, right? Like I loved that. My ego loved that. It was like, I liked being like, having muscles and feeling strong. And that was so great and so empowering in so many ways. And then I just knew that I needed to slow down because my body, like it also just you hit a point where your body isn't responding the same way from
Hmm.
doing things for so long. And I knew that I needed to pull back. And I think my ego is just so tied to what that would look like. And yeah, so then I kind of like had that point where initially, once I kind of stopped, it's like I put on a little bit more body fat and it was mentally really hard for me. And it's something that it's like weird to talk about. And a lot of people, like I would say mostly former athletes could really relate to this, or really anyone going through the journey that I went through. It's like once you stop the sport, once you pull away from training that way, like you're confused on who you are, you
Hmm.
feel weird in your body, you're like you feel like everything's slowing down, and so then you like want to rapidly go into do more, do more, do more. But mentally I knew that like wasn't the right decision, but I still physically, emotionally felt like I had to. So it was like such a difficult battle in my mind of like, what do I actually do next, and what does health look like in this phase of my life where I just want to be, like, for lack of a better way to put it, but just like I just want to be a normal person. Like I just want to be happy. Like I want to, like I don't want to have to be worried about what my next meal is. I don't want to have to be worried about my performance tomorrow at the gym. Like I just want to exist and be at peace. Um, so that once I really woke up to that, I like got certified in life coaching because that was really amazing, and neurolinguistics, which is really cool. So it's really about how language affects the brain. And I already was doing a lot of that stuff and studied a lot of it unofficially. But for me, I think having that formal schooling, so it's like a year-long program, which is a
Oh,
lot.
wow.
Yeah, it's like higher level, internationally accredited. So I don't know. I guess for me, it's like I want the best. Like I love to learn. I want to get the best possible experience with coaching and knowing how to do it properly, because it's a space where you can do damage to a person,
Hmm.
or like you can hurt a person if you're not coaching them properly. And so for me it's like I'm way too emotionally tied to the people that I work with, in the sense that like I really care about seeing them do well. And so if I know that I can prepare myself by being the best possible coach, then I'm going to give them the best possible service. And like, yeah, I want to feel confident and be able to firmly stand behind the work that I provide people with. So for me, that was a really important piece. Like I didn't want to just jump into doing it without having the proper training. And I learned so much, even though I thought I knew a lot. I learned so much in that program that really showed me how you can take a person through a really deep transformation and how to hit those like subconscious layers that actually allow them to step away from this old version of themselves and into a new, empowered, embodied, integrated version of themselves. So yeah, which kind of led to the birth of what I'm doing now. So right now I have a couple of projects, but the main part with my business is coaching and really combining the elements of connecting to the body, really learning to love your body, trust your intuition, and start to look at all of the things outside of nutrition and wellness that actually influence the way you feel about yourself and your life. So it's a very holistic approach. So it's around really, yeah, it's like deep into the mental work. It's giving people the ability to move into an intuitive way of eating and living that feels aligned, that I just genuinely like. It's like everything I've ever learned I put into this program, and I want to make it the best. And I really see this as something that will continue to expand. I'm incorporating other coaches into it too, so people get to really see the full journey of what it means to know yourself and know what's the right path for you, rather than being like, oh, do XYZ. It's like, no, like let's tap into your intuition, let's tap into your inner guidance and use that as the essentially the tool we will use to create the path that you will walk forward.
Awesome. All right, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So
That was my long answer. Yeah.
that, but it was perfect because it does show that journey, and I've I kind of went through somewhat of a similar journey, a little bit less extreme than yours, but starting out coaching is like, just here's your workout plan, here's your macro plan, follow this, you will get results. And technically that is right. As coaches we've both been doing this for a while, we also know that that's going to work for maybe like 5% of clients. The other 95% will not follow it because they're not doing the inner work and everything else. So my first question I want to talk about is, what is your definition of intuitive eating? Because ultimately that's where I think a lot of people want to get to, but what is it?
This is a great question because it was my answer. It's interesting because I remember before thinking like, oh, well, you can't just become an intuitive eater without learning nutrition. So I've always really believed that because okay, this is the way that I see it. It's being able to trust your body and telling you what to eat, how much is enough. But the thing about it is you don't just do it without formal understanding of nutrition because especially with introducing processed foods, it's not as simple to follow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think there's a lot of different elements. So like if you're someone that's always eating on the go, you're always busy, you're eating processed food, you're never sitting down to eat a meal, it's going to be almost impossible to be an intuitive eater because there's no connection from your mind to your body. So and to really begin to intuitive eat, you have to have a general understanding of like, okay, this is what balanced nutrition looks like, right? Because there's going to still be a lot of conditioning around what's good for me, what's bad for me. And I don't like to categorize foods as good or bad, but just for simplistic terms and explanation, it's like there's a lot of mental conditioning that needs to be deconditioned before you can step into intuitive eating. So if you don't really have that, it's going to feel like an impossible task.
Mm-hmm.
Once you decondition that and start to understand like, oh, this type of food can be nourishing, this type of food isn't. Like you have a phase where your body is still like you're building a connection from your mind to your body. So to do that, you have to do things like meditation or any kind of practice that allows you to start to understand the signals from your body. And it's a practice. Like you don't there's no list of like, okay, this is how you're physically going to feel with every emotion or sensation or experience or food that you consume. It's unique to every person. So it's really about having that proper guidance to learn how to turn inward and what your specific signals are, and to understand like, oh, when I feel this, I'm hungry. When I feel this, I'm angry. When I feel this, I'm stressed. Because especially like I want to tap on stress because a lot of us live this life where we're so busy, we're not thinking about our body. And so to intuitively eat, and like if your stress hormones are high, you're not even going to recognize anything that any signal that your body is trying to tell you. And so that's why, like, just tapping on that point of the program, it's like giving you the opportunity to start to look at those things because you can't be an intuitive eater if you're just on the go and eating it just like never resting and have so much stress. And like so many people don't even know how stressed out they are because they've just adapted to having a high level of stress. Like a lot of people come in and they're like, I don't think my stress is that high. And then we'll be like, okay, like body scan, like, how are your shoulders feeling? How's your head feeling? And they're like, oh yeah, like actually I'm kind of sore here. I'm feeling this. And like that's the start to recognizing, but it's like if you're not used to asking yourself those questions and checking in with yourself, you may never know how much stress you're actually holding in your body that's blocking you from tapping into your intuition whether it comes to like just general life intuition or eating through your intuition.
Awesome. So stress is a huge one. I love that you brought up that people are conditioned to it. I had a client years ago, and she'll know if she's listening to the podcast, because she still follows me. But she, I would always tell her that we need to work on stress. that a big reason that she's just like emotionally eating is that she refused to believe that was stress. But she had shoulders were like up to here, like all shrugged up, everything super stiff, and everything just like hurt on her body, just like moving in general. Like you are stressed and you're stiff and you can't relax. But her life now is different than she was a trader on Wall Street. So she was so used to like that extreme stress of a job, like, oh, my life's not stressful now compared to that. I can't be like, no, you're still really stressed out. You're just not like ripping your hair out and needing to like down yourself in cigarettes and alcohol like you were before when you were working that crazy job, which I can't imagine that. But um, how do you go about telling so? Because I'll run into this as well, as I was sure you have in the past. Like, all right, someone wants to lose weight, they want to improve their health, and then you bring up stress management. And how do you go about getting someone to actually incorporate some sort of stress management routine and then actually like sticking with it?
This, I think,
Loaded
can be
question.
difficult. Yeah. I mean, my first thought is like when you're someone that's used to functioning under lots of stress and like not fully having the awareness of how much stress you're actually under, once you recognize it. So once like most people will come to the point where they're like, okay, like something's got to give. And I think that's similar to how I explained it for myself, where it was just like, okay, you just one day wake up and you're like, this isn't it. This something feels off. I don't know what, but like something's off. And the first thing that you have to do is become comfortable with that. So like people have a natural resistance to implementing these relaxation or stress management processes because you have to realize that when your central nervous system is conditioned to operate under lots of stress, when you try to relax, it's like physically impossible for you. It feels like your central nervous system is now telling you like, no, 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 wait, no, we need the stress, like we need the pressure to operate, and like not having the stress, not having the pressure means we're not going to operate. And so then your brain's like, well, no, if I don't operate, then I don't succeed, and if I don't succeed, I don't have like I'm not loved and I'm not respected. And it's like this is what's going on subconsciously. Most people don't recognize it, but that's part of doing the inner work. But with that, you have to know that as a coach that people are going to go through that. Some people want to hear that and learn that information so that they know that they can recognize like or start to make the connection like, oh, is that's what's going on with me? Like is there a disconnect there? Do I need to learn how to ease my nervous system out of this stressful state? So that is the really big important piece that you have to be aware of, because they're not like if you're just starting that journey, you're just not going to be conscious that your body is doing that. You're going to think like, oh, well, there's no point in doing these relaxation purpose practices or meditation. They don't work because I can't even relax. And that's normal. That's always going to happen when
Mm-hmm.
you first start. It's
Okay.
uncomfortable. So it's then making a commitment to doing it. So what can be really helpful and what I've started doing with people is just running them through a little guided meditation during our session. So I'll just carve out 5 or 10 minutes and just walk them through what it feels like. And having that, people find like I've had so many people say this, or it's just like, oh my gosh, like once you walked me through it and just explaining to them what the goal is and what is normal to feel, it really helped relax them, because we get so worried about like, what am I supposed to feel when I'm doing this? That we actually stay in our head and we never actually enter our body because we're so worried about what it's supposed to feel like. So it's guiding them through it and telling them like, oh, it's normal for this to happen during meditation. It's normal for thoughts like this to come up. It's like the goal isn't to stop thinking. It's and just showing them. And to me, that's been the best teacher and why I've done the things I did in my business. It's like physically showing someone goes so much further than just telling them to go do X, Y, Z. And so creating a space when someone shows up and says like, hey, this is what I want to work on, as a coach, you have to know how to actually take someone through that process and what does work, and knowing if someone is an experiential learner versus someone that can comprehend it mentally and just go do it, you just need to understand how that person learns and
Okay.
then take that and use that information to properly show them in the way that they're going to receive it. So yeah, accountability is number one, the biggest piece. And then the second piece is just like them having the proper support and experience to allow them and like the understanding of what that looks like.
That's awesome. And what would be some different things you use for stress management? Because meditation's awesome, journaling's awesome, but sometimes people will ask like what other things there are. So are there any other techniques or things you use with clients to help them with managing their stress?
Yes, there's so many great ones out there. First, I think something that I don't talk about a lot would be even just little things like proper supplementation. So, just making sure that you're adequately nourished can make a difference in the results that you're experiencing. And if we want to sink further into specific things, like there's EFT tapping, if you've heard of that.
No.
Um, so essentially, it's kind of like you're tapping different meridians on your body, different
Mm,
acupuncture points.
okay.
So it's built on a similar basis of acupuncture where you're putting needles in different meridians. But this, you're just using your fingers to tap on different locations of the body that can
Mm,
actually alleviate stress.
interesting.
So that's something I love the tools that you can use that don't require you to actually physically have anything, something that you can just do right away wherever you are with whatever you've got. You can like go to the I tell people I'm like if you're in an uncomfortable situation, you feel your anxiety rising or your stress rising, like excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and do this exercise. And it's like just like, tapping somewhere, breathing, breath work. If you're familiar with breath work, that's a really
Yep.
big one that's gaining a lot of popularity now, that's been around for a long time. um, I also think shaking the body does a lot because what stress is, I don't see stress as necessarily like an exact emotion. It's more of like undefined culmination of multiple emotions,
That's
typically, is what we're
fair. Yeah.
feeling. And so, like we tapped on or touched on a little bit earlier, your body physically manifests stress and the emotions that you're feeling. So sometimes it can help to literally just like get up and like shake all your limbs. It sounds so silly, but that can help because I've even heard this, and I don't know the full science behind it, but physically I've done it and it feels good. Like if your body is in like a fight or flight mode, you can just like get up and like run in place really quickly and just get your heart rate up because that actually helps you complete the cycle of fight or flight. So you can actually get your body out of it. And so that's why exercise is another great stress reliever because you might be shaking, you might be running, you're elevating your heart rate. And that actually does a lot for your physical, emotional state, all the emotions that you've like held in. That's a way to release them. Um, Yoga, of course, is another great one. Um, Even like little things like anything that's ritualistic that relaxes you. So there's like little scent oils that you can use that are tied
Mm,
to
hmm.
relaxation. You can, I had one in my mind that just escaped me. But yeah, like I talk about a lot of them, like even on my social media and stuff too, because there are some really great ways that you don't need to use medications to manage your stress, which typically seems, which I think there's a time and a place, right? Like I
Yep.
absolutely see the importance of it, but it's also something that you don't have to do. And if you have the goal to get off of medications that you're using to help manage it, you absolutely can. You just have to be committed to doing those practices, not just every once in a while, but consistently doing them every single day.
Yeah. Breathwork's my favorite.
Mm.
Personally, it's that and journaling for me help me the most. But there's a lot of people where they just want something like I've tried this and they might just have this bad memory, like that, a bad experience. Like that doesn't work for me. Kind of like counting macros doesn't work for me. We know that counting macros will work for people, but if you've had a bad experience, you're not going to like fully commit to it in the future until like you realize like, oh, I that was more of me thing in the past. and I just have this negative emotion tied to it. So sometimes it's just like finding something else, and then you can kind of work in like, hey, like maybe you should start journaling again. Like journaling didn't work for me, and then they go through things, and they're like, okay, I start journaling again. Cool. Um, a random one for me. I think this is might be helpful for someone just starting out who they just have like that entrepreneur mind that doesn't shut off. Ice baths worked
Oh,
really
yeah.
well because you can't think of anything and you have to do the breath work or you can't like you won't make it through. So first time I did an ice bath, I was like, wow, that was basically meditation for the last 8 minutes without trying. Like got in, it was hard, but it was also like had to just do deep breathing for 8 minutes straight, or you're like shivering and you just won't be able to do the time. It's like I feel amazing. I feel like I should go and be really productive now. Um, but yeah, you can't think of anything.
Yeah, and that's a big piece of it is like getting like whatever it takes to get out of your mind and back into your body is the key. Because it's, we live so much in our minds, especially all day long when we're working jobs and taking care of the family and all of this. And we almost have to detach from our body in order to make it through. So we get so used to being detached. And all it really is like coming back into your body, into the present moment.
Mhm. Um, that's awesome. I love all those ideas. So I'm going to change gears a little bit because I want to talk about inner work. And a lot of times I will tell clients like it's kind of like you turning into like you 2.0. Like you're where you're at now, and you 2.0 is like the person you want to become. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do to like bridge that gap between this 2.0 version of you. But why is it like, why can't you just like follow a diet and work out and get this amazing weight loss that you'll never have to worry about food again because the weight will never come back on? Like what's so important about doing the inner work?
Yes, this is so, so important because a lot of people think, or we're conditioned to think, that if we just do XYZ, then it will equal this outcome. And there's a lot of layers. So the biggest thing is around identity. So most people have a specific identity, like, oh, this is how I see myself.
Mhm.
And so, in the example of nutrition and fitness, like if someone's like, I see myself as unhealthy and I'm trying to get healthy, what's really going on the subconscious layer is your brain is like, no, I'm an unhealthy person. So even if you do all the quote unquote healthy things, it's essentially like you're an actor in a show. You're just playing the role of a healthy person, but you
That's a
don't
good way to
truly
think of it.
believe that you are. Yeah. Yeah. I love a good metaphor.
It's a
so,
really good way to think about it.
yeah. So it's like, okay, well, eventually you don't want to act anymore. And so you have to change your default settings. So the inner work is changing your default settings versus just playing a role. Like you actually have to go in there and change who you see yourself as. And so much of that is tied to things that are like how we've formulated our identity before the age of like 7. So I think there's different layers of your formative years and how you figure out who you are and how you cope with your emotions and how you deal with stress and all of this. So before the age of 7, so much of what you're going to believe is ingrained in you. And then there's the next layer, I think from like 7 to 14, where you're in your evolution, you're really focused on like figuring out how to deal with your emotions, which is what a lot of this comes back to. Um, I bring up emotions a lot because it is like one of the key parts of the inner work that you have
Mhm.
to address, that so often we have a lot of shame around expressing or identifying with or experiencing, because we're just, I think most people, at least in my generation, it was like don't talk about your feelings, ignore them, keep moving forward.
Yes.
Emotions are weak, don't express them. Like, and my family still, if I like cry, my family's just like, stop being weak. We didn't raise you this way. And like, that's how a lot of people were raised.
Yeah.
But then it just becomes like, oh, well, you have that emotional experience. It pushes you back to your default settings. And then you want to quit because you feel like you can't overcome this, or you don't know how to deal. You never properly learned how to deal with the emotions that keep derailing you. So then it's just, yeah, that is the biggest piece. And I'm trying to remember your initial question. I feel like I might be going. I love to go on a tangent, but
It was basically what's so important about doing the inner work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that would definitely that answered the question. I think mostly it's important because you have to change yourself on an identity level for these things to last. And knowing how to do that involves understanding your emotions and how those influence you and who you see yourself as. And so like if that doesn't change, if all of your efforts will feel futile and you'll just come back to what you were doing before.
And you got certified with, is it linguistic programming?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So kind of with the inner work, how important is like your self-talk with transforming yourself into like that person you want to become? Because I know if you just like say like, I can never change, or I'm just always like this. When I do X, I this. And if you don't change that, you kind of just repeat this vicious circle. So how important is that? And how do you identify like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be talking to myself this way?
Yeah, this is where I feel like working with coach is so helpful because you just like you don't think about it until it's reflected back to you in some way, right? Like with this, so many of us, especially speaking from the place of like someone who's really ambitious and wants to achieve things and succeed and whatnot, many of us who identify this way have really negative self-talk.
Yes.
It's like you're like, oh, you didn't do, or like, oh, you didn't go to the gym today, you piece of shit, get up. Like, it's like, this is what you're saying to yourself. And like, I was just like, well, I need that. I need someone to like yell at me. Otherwise, like, I'm going to be lazy, or like all these backwards ties that I had in my head around what it meant to be like successful. And like, I needed, you get so attached to the negative self-talk because it was also led to your success. Right. So unconsciously, you have a fear around healing that because if you heal that, then you're not going to be successful because that pressure pushed you to do what you did. But when you're in your journey and you hit that point where you're like, okay, me yelling at myself is no longer working, like you have to change what you're saying to yourself because like what got you 80% of the way isn't going to get you the next 20%. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, this worked up to this level of success. But for me to now actually take that next step of fulfillment and sustainability, I need to do things differently. And so a lot of people, the best way, because like a lot of my clients, I would say, are empathetic individuals, people that feel very deeply for the people around them. So I always ask the question, I'm like, okay, so imagine your best friend or like your sibling or whoever called you and was like, hey, I didn't go to the gym today. What would you say to them? You'd likely say, dude, it's okay. Like, it's just one day. It's like not a big deal. Or like, oh, you ate pizza today? It's fine. Like, you know, like that's total, or like you binge ate today because you were like stressed out and like, that's okay. But like, if it were you, like, would you say to them like, oh my God, you're such a failure. You're always going to be this way, dude. I like give up on you. Like, I can't, you would never say that to someone that you loved. Right. So it's like, what if you don't say it to people you love, why are we saying it to ourselves? And
Yeah.
I think that's where it really hits people, or they're like, wow, I'm so mean to myself. Like, and you have that realization and you're like, all right. I mean, and I always say, like, your relationship with yourself is a relationship. So you wouldn't be friends with someone if they just made you feel really bad about yourself all the time. Like, you wouldn't
Yeah.
choose to spend more time with them. So, the same way, when you look at it as a relationship that you have to cultivate with you to encourage you to move into a better space, you have to love and support yourself the same way you would love and support someone else.
I like that.
Yeah.
There's I'll see this a lot when people who do skip their workouts or something, and it's, we have a question with their weekly check-in, and like, is there any other details? And I've had clients in the past be like, I just need to stop being lazy, or I'm just lazy. I just need to like stop doing this. Like, I just tell them, like, you're not allowed to call yourself lazy. If you catch yourself, you have to stop telling yourself you're lazy, because what do lazy people do? They don't go to the gym. Like, do you believe that you're actually a lazy person? I like break down like all the things that they do. Like, you're a mom, you're this, like, you're a CEO, or you're a senior project manager. You're doing, like, you're not lazy. But you believe yourself a lazy like, if you tell yourself that enough times, you believe it. They're like, oh, and then it helps. Like, I caught myself. I didn't realize how often I just thought to myself, like, oh, I'm being lazy.
Yeah, we condition ourselves. Like, when you are someone that's really ambitious, it's like you condition yourself to focus so much on what's wrong, right? Like, you'll hyper fixate on what could be better, and that can completely negate all of the positive, amazing things you are doing. And so, part of that, like, sometimes nothing needs to change other than your perspective.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't need to quit your job. Maybe you don't need to go do this less or whatever. Like, maybe it is as simple as you shifting your perspective. And that, like, I've seen it. I'm thinking of one of my clients specifically who, she's a lawyer, and there's a lot of pressure in that field to perform and work more hours and sacrifice everything you have to achieve and to work up and try to make partner. And there's just that expectation of the path that you should follow, and the best way to get there is to give up everything in your life for your work. And you're glorified for being that way. And so with her, it was like, okay, we're just going to shift perspective here and create a couple of boundaries. Like, you don't work before the hours of X. And if you feel the temptation every time you look at your phone, well, then, like, don't look at your phone until this time. So it's like, then suddenly, like, nothing dramatically changed. It was like a small boundary we set, and started to focus on what is happening that's going really well in her work. And then she got a promotion. So it was like, and then she's like, dude, I feel so happy. I take vacations now. And I just think it's so amazing when I just think about that, because all we did was say, like, oh, your worth isn't tied to how many hours you work. So we're just going to change that perspective. And once she did that, it was just like everything. She was just like, that one session changed my life. It was like an hour
That's
conversation we had.
amazing.
We worked through that. And she's like, that was like the best session we ever had. And it was like, it can be something that simple where you're just changing the way you perceive something. And that can have a dramatic effect on how fulfilled and happy you feel day to day.
Like, a lot of times people feel unhappy because they're not being fulfilled in things. And that can a lot of times come from work, and work working during like your personal time, which is like never like productive work either. Like, it's like this distracted, like, you're like with the kids, but you're trying to do this. Like, if I have to, like, for me, do work watching the kids, like, it takes me an hour to do something that would take 15 minutes. But if you can set that boundary, you can be way more productive during that work time. And then you can be off. And if you set that boundary, be guilt free, like, hey, like, I will do that tomorrow and I will get it done in 15 minutes. It'll take me like an hour and a half right now, or it'll take me half an hour tomorrow morning when I can really focus on something. And then you get do the things you want to do. And then you also are like moving forward with your career or whatever you want to do that way.
Yeah, boundaries are very difficult at first because they're so, like you mentioned, the emotion of guilt. And this is something that still comes up for me. I'm still actively working on it, where you set a boundary and it's so like you feel it. You're like, this is so hard for me to set and say to you because I feel so guilty for saying it. And even internal ones like work, for example, like I had initially said, like, oh, I told myself I will get this thing done on Monday. And then Monday came and I was like, I need a break. Like this thing, like I checked in with myself. It doesn't need to be done right now. Like if it's done tomorrow,
No big
nothing will
deal.
change. Yeah, it's completely fine for it to be done tomorrow. But I was like really fixated on like I told myself that I would do it Monday and I'm not doing it. But I'm like, you'll do it tomorrow. But internally, I still kept carrying that guilt with me when I'm trying to use Monday to relax because I needed it. It kept coming back into my brain like, oh my God, I really need to do that. Oh my God, I really need to do that. Oh my God, I should just do it now. And I like couldn't let myself relax because I just kept saying like, it needs to be done now. And so there's that part of your nervous system that still needs to be relaxed and eased into it. And that shows me there's a little bit more work for me to do internally around
Mhm.
my tie with that and the emotion of guilt being so connected to that. And I actually just recently bought a book that is really cool. I think it might be literally called Doing the Inner Work or something like, or Inner Work, something. I forget exactly what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But what's really cool is like you see these different emotions and you can tie them back to personal beliefs. And this is something you don't need a book to realize. You just need the space to start to look at these patterns in yourself. But you can start to see, like, oh, here's the pattern that I'm running. I, I'm doing this thing and I set a boundary. It makes me feel guilty. And then when I feel guilty, I cave on my boundary and I do this thing. So it's like, well, how do we break that cycle? And what's the trauma that made me feel this way? Or what's the belief, this personal limiting belief that I have that's making me feel this way? What do I want to replace it with? How do I embody that? So it's like kind of shows you what you need to do and how you need to start to shift the way you're looking at it. And like, it's okay. It's not, you don't just flip a switch and it's easy to set a boundary. It's going to be uncomfortable at first. And it's knowing that and consciously continuing to choose to keep working on it.
Absolutely. I was forced to create boundaries because of my wife. So my wife's work is kind of like she's a nurse. So while people text her, she's like on and off. Like here's her hours versus when you're an entrepreneur, like you can work literally 24/7 and your mind's always going. So I'd be on my phone and she would be like, you need to get off. You're not spending time with us. Like, oh, so it's still something like it's still to this day, it's something I work on, but it's definitely one of those things like, oh, okay, I need to set this down, spend time with my family. Cause the whole reason for starting doing what I'm doing is to provide for my family. So if I'm not spending any time with them, like that's kind of counterproductive. Um, it's hard to realize that. And it's just like these time frames. So I know like these morning times, these evening times are kind of like no work times. And then work times, like get your work done and kind of what you said, like there's certain things that I would like to get done today, but if it gets done tomorrow, then gets done tomorrow. And then there's the things that no, they need to get done today. Like, oh, it's Tuesday, it's time to do client check-ins. Like that has to get done. That's no exceptions. And there's been some late nights of, hey, family time, you didn't get that done, 9 o'clock at night. That's when, the girls are in bed. You're going to go finish that up before you go work out. Like, cool.
Yeah. Boundaries with yourself can be some of the most challenging
They're
ones because it's
tough.
easy. Yeah, it's easy to ignore them. But the more, I think a big thought for me in that area is like part of this journey is building self-trust. So many of us don't trust ourselves. And so I think always having that reminder, like yeah, I want to build trust with myself. So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to stick to it. Or if I know I need to set this boundary, I need to respect myself and stick to this boundary. And, I don't think they always have to be hard, steadfast rules. Like, I think give grace where grace can be given. But also like making sure that you are showing up for yourself the same way. Like, again, continuing to think about it as like a relationship that you have with yourself. Like if someone says like, oh, hey, like, if you tell someone you're going to do something, you're more likely to do it. That's just human nature. And so do that with yourself as well. And you'll see that you trust yourself more and more over time. And you second guess yourself a lot less. And you can lean more into your intuition, and you feel a lot less internal conflict when you can really commit to that. But again, always going back to the inner work, there are things that are going to prevent you from being able to do that if you don't work on the blocks that you have around that.
Yeah. The inner work's tough, but you definitely have to build that trust, or you're just going to always be in a constant cycle going kind of like nowhere. It's just a vicious circle. And until you build that trust with yourself, it's tough to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I see it in a lot of women. It's almost like a normal pattern of externalizing or looking for your answers from outside of yourself, which I think really hurts self-trust. Like, for example, I mean, girls do it with everything. Like, oh, hey, what do you think of my outfit? What color should I paint my nails? What should we eat for dinner? It's like we very infrequently really check in and say, like, what do I really actually want? And this way, what happens is it hurts your self trust, because you're basically saying, like, I'm not capable of formulating the correct answer. I don't know what's best for me. Someone else knows what's best for me. And that would just, and it's little stuff. And like, the more you notice it and the more decisive you can be, it helps you build that self trust too, to be like, okay, I'm going to choose this, period. And just like practice doing it with little stuff, and you'll see that it can build over time.
That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, you're right. Like just getting external validation for everything. And men get it too in different ways. Like you get like the house, you get the car, you do those things, and you have to like show that you're like worthy. But then it kind of like with you and your transformation with the business is like, are you actually happy inside, or did you just do all the things and inside you're like miserable?
Mm.
I know mostly you work with women, but with that story with like men, a buddy of mine, he worked when he was living in Australia. He had family over there, so he like lived there for a few years, working. I forget, was he in sales, or I forget what he was doing, but there's someone at the place he was working at in sales, and he's like, I don't get why my family doesn't like me. Like they have everything they need. They have the car. He made a ton of money and all this stuff, but he was traveling. Like he was gone out of the home for most of the time, and like didn't realize like in himself, like he wanted to like have the perfect family, but perfect family had him in it. He was never there. And then he was like just very, very unhappy, and like couldn't figure out like, why is my wife unhappy? Why do my kids not like me? I'm giving them this. No, they want you, not the things.
Yeah. When it comes to relationships, it's hard because, I think it goes both ways. Like, okay, there must have been, like, when I hear this story, my first thought is like, oh, well, was that communicated?
Right.
Like, was she conscious enough to say, hey, this is what I need from you? If, and like, it 100% goes both ways, because sometimes like it is unconscious. We just don't know because
Yeah.
we don't we just don't take the time to really analyze, or we're afraid to ask for what we really want because we think we're supposed to be happy with what already is in front of us. And sometimes, yeah, it is right in front of us, everything we need. And then other times we just hold back and we're afraid to say, yeah, this is like what I really want is more time with you, or this is where the breakdown is, or yeah. So it's like there's a lot of unconscious stuff going on in relationships, and it's like it's all about that communication. And the best way to really work on that is be more self-aware, like to recognize your own feelings. And so it's amazing that he took that step and was like, oh, I recognize that this could be a potential problem, and they tried to change this or remedy this and see how that affects things. And so like it can happen from either side for sure, but it always comes back to like trying to know yourself and doing that work on yourself and taking that space to really get to know you, to like truly know who you are outside of all of your conditioning of who you thought you're supposed to be.
Biggest thing with relationships is communication, and most people are not
Yeah.
great communicators. Like, it's
Mm.
not just like very few people have the talent to be like just they're born as great communicators. Most people need to work on it. That's a big thing with my wife and I. Like, we've built over time, like just communicating the frustrations. Like, whenever like my wife gets frustrated with me, it's generally like, you didn't communicate like you needed this. Like, if you told me, it would have been fine. And same thing goes for me too. So it's like when we communicate, it's like things run smoother, the relationship's better, and you have to communicate, but you have to also like you said, realize what you actually need. Because some people just they're like, well, I'm just stressed, I'm burnt out, I just need to get away. Like, maybe that is what you need, or maybe you just need to communicate like, I'm just overwhelmed, I need like a night, or I need you to do these few things. And it's like, okay, that's not a big deal. Like, okay, I can take that on. And then it's like, oh, magically I'm not so overwhelmed anymore.
Mm. Yeah, there are so many layers to relationships
Yes.
because there's so many elements between like knowing what's you, knowing what's a projection, knowing what needs to shift, knowing it is a lot. And I mean, I do think it all comes back to like where you began your journey with relationships, when you were taught like, oh, this is healthy relating, or I shouldn't say healthy, but like this is normal relating. And so we learn that in our young formative years. And so sometimes when we have that, we have a lot more to overcome, and communication feels scary, and it can feel threatening to open up because it poses risk and it expresses discomfort, and then there's the fear of being abandoned. So it's like these wounds go so deep, and it's
Yes.
like it's also like holding space for that too, and being able to recognize like where your partner's journey was and what your journey is, and how it's normal that you guys are going to trigger each other. And like you said, it's continuing to know yourself and be able to communicate that. And like communication seems so simple, and once you figure out how to do it properly, it can be. But yeah, you can have so many negative thought patterns on what it means to be vulnerable that it can keep you stuck for so long, and not even with intention to like hurt someone or not allow your relationship to flourish. It's just that like we don't know how to feel safe while communicating. And yeah, that can be hard, but always going back to the inner work. It's like the more you know you, the more you see your patterns, the more you start to unearth these things, the easier it becomes to move forward in a way that feels safe and happy and fulfilled.
Yes, absolutely. So I know I've taken quite a bit of your time, and I feel like we could keep talking for another
Yeah.
2 hours, but generally there's a time limit on this. So where can people find you?
Yes, if you'd like to continue the conversation, I mostly hang out on Instagram. So you can find me at fuel the underscore fire. And you can message me there or just check out my content. I have a blog. And also, yeah, I have my podcast, Feel the Fire Podcast. So you can check that out as well.
Awesome. And then how do people work with you if they want to get into your coaching program?
Currently, I have a group coaching program that launches in January, and we are opening enrollment now. So it's really exciting. You can check the link in my bio on Instagram or check my website. All the links are in my podcast and my social media. So you can find more information there.
Awesome. And then those will all be linked down below, guys. So if you want to learn more about Shanon, what she does, you're interested in working with her one-on-one or in her group coaching program, and any of the offers she has, all that, just go down to the show notes and click one of the links and you'll be taken right over to her. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure.
Of course. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to today's episode with Shanon. Make sure you drop down to the show notes. Give Shanon a follow. Check out her podcast. Also, while you're at it, go ahead and rate the show real quick. Give it a 5-star review. Leave an actual review, as that is helpful. I go through those each week and see what people are saying. It helps me figure out what content is actually connecting with you, the listener. And it helps me figure out which guests to bring back onto the show, other than just the ones I want to talk about. Because ultimately, I'm doing this to help you. Yes, selfishly, I like to have interesting conversations with some people, but at the end of the day, I want to create a podcast that gives great information to my listener base. So whoever you like, whichever episode, what style of episodes, what style of content, I look at that stuff and take your feedback very seriously. If you like something or you don't like something, I keep that in mind and adjust in the future to who I bring onto this podcast.